Great. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Town Administrator Screening Committee. Today is 15th of May, 2023. It's 7:01 p.m. My name is Mitch Cohen. I chair the Northborough Select Board. Since this is our first meeting, the first thing we have to do is organize. So I'm just calling it together just because no one else, nobody can do it anyway. So is there a nomination for chair?
I'd like to nominate you, actually, Mitch, if that you're interested.
Sure. Thank you, Carrie. Is
I
there a
would second that.
Okay, thank you, David. Any other nominations for chair? Okay, all those in favor? All right. Okay, any opposed? Okay, I guess I'm chair. Is there a nomination for, vice chair?
Through the chair, I'd be interested to know if anybody's interested in vice chair.
Marianne, by any chance would you be interested?
I'm happy to be vice chair.
Second.
Okay. All right, any other nominations? All those in favor of Mariam as vice chair? Okay, any opposed? Excellent, congratulations and thank you. Lastly, we need nomination for clerk to take meeting minutes. Perhaps someone who has pen and paper handy. Would anyone be willing to be clerk and take some meeting minutes? They do not need to be very thorough for this board. Bryce is willing. Is there a nomination for Bryce for clerk?
Nominate Bryce for clerk.
Second.
All right, any other nominations? All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, thank you. I assume there's nobody opposed. All right, so, I will read what little there is of a charge of this group from the ad that you all filled out. The town of Northborough is seeking interested citizens, that's us, to serve on the town administrator screening committee. This committee will be charged with reviewing applicants for the town administrator position and provide recommendations to the Board of Selectmen for final interviews. That's basically our job. The Select Board has hired MRI Consulting, Bob, right here, to guide us through the process. They'll be doing most of the talking this evening. And with that, tell us our job.
I like that, and I like the process of nomination here. If it goes this smoothly, Mitch, piece of cake. So, I'll start. Some of you know me, you probably know Buzz, you've seen us around town. I'm Bob Mercier, I've been with MRI for almost 10 years now. I retired out of Burlington, Massachusetts, as the town administrator. Majority of my career was along Route 3. I spent 7 or 8 years as the town manager in Barica, and majority of my career, 20 plus years. I did it twice, was in Burlington. I live up in Tingsboro. I've been an elected select board member in my community, and we just had our town meeting last week, over with in 2 hours, Bob. Beat that. And I've been doing this for quite some time. Recently around here, we just finished Westford, the town manager position in Westford. So, Buzz.
I'm Buzz.
He's older than I am, by the way.
Yeah, just by a few months. I was a town manager in Andover, Massachusetts for 25 years, and prior to that I was in Wilmington for 10. And I've total probably 40 years in the profession. Been doing this for about 7 years, working with Bob on these kind of searches. And just happy to be here, to provide you folks with some guidance, some expertise on how to find a town administrator for you folks. Mitch, I think we'd like to hear the folks on the committee, what their background is and how they happen to come be sitting here at this table.
That's a great idea. Good. Tim, you want to get us started?
My name's Tim Kalin. I am chair of the Appropriations Committee. I have served on the Select Board. I created and implemented the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I also served on the Council of Aging. Professionally, I am a small business owner, and currently I'm working with a client as their CFO, another client as president for the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Consulting Company, and another company as their strategic advisor. In addition, I have a podcast called Born on Third, and I am writing a book.
Wow.
What do you do in your spare time?
Yeah.
Oh, I got 2 kids, they're 10 and 7. I coach my son's hockey team.
Wonderful. My name is Mariam Ibrahimi. I currently serve as the chair of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee. Previously, I've run for school committee. I graduated from the Northborough Southborough Regional School District in 2019, and I am a graduating senior.
Congrats.
Thank you.
My name is Bryce McKnight. I'm a second-year member of the Northborough K-8 School Committee. I've got a young family here in Northborough with 2 little kids in the school system, and I currently operate as an independent food and beverage consultant, and I'm excited to be here.
David Durgan. I retired in 2015 as the 17-year fire chief in the town of Northborough, 9 years, and another community prior to that, 42 years total service in the fire service. Beyond that, last 8 years have been pretty good being retired. I do work independently as a consultant on fire engineering, inspection, and professional witness type duties.
I'm Carrie Martinek. I'm chair of the planning board. I've also served on several nonprofits within town. For a while, I was on the executive committee for our regional planning agency, CMRPC. And in my professional life, I'm the head of brand and marketing at a sales training organization.
And my name's Scott Stocklin. I am just a resident. My wife and I have lived here for a little over 24 years, raised our kids here professionally. I have a background in finance with a concentration in retirement plans. I worked for Fidelity for a number of years, and I'm currently with Charles Schwab.
Mitch Cohen, currently the chair of the Northborough Select Board. I'm also on the Library Trustees and the Fire Station Building Committee. In a former life in another town, I served on a town administrator search committee much like this. By day, I play with computers as a software engineering manager for an ed tech company.
Good, thank you.
Just turn this off. Sorry.
And you get technology,
I know.
can't get away from it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for participating. I will tell you that Buzz and I are thrilled with Northborough. We know it's a good community. As you know, we've advertised. The 30-day period is up. We got 27, I think, at the end of the day, responses last Monday. Buzz and I have gone through those responses, and we think we have a good group that we want to send some essay questions to. And that we'll be talking a little further into this process as to where that is. Then, Mitch, from our perspective, I think we got to look at the calendar a bit and try to put some dates together so that, I mean, it's tough to get 7 people together unless they have some good advance notice. So we want to make sure we leave here tonight with some dates that we can start to think about, and you can get on calendars. In terms of the way we screen out, and we've talked to the select board about this, it's very important to us, because Buzz and I were in the positions, it's very important to us to keep the confidentiality of this search as confidential as we possibly can. There are people, and we've seen them, they're in our process, that are sitting, administrators, managers, and likely haven't notified their appointing authority yet as to what they're doing. So it's incredibly important to us, and we stress that with Mitch and the board members, and they understood that, and I'm sure you understand if you understand the field. It's a highly public field, and people want to be very careful about getting their names out, unless they're serious candidates. We all know the rules. You know, you're a finalist going before the select board to be interviewed. Your name's public, no question about it. But prior to that, anyway, we stress confidentiality, and I'm not worried about the group. We just need to say that it's a process that we're proud of, and we haven't lost people because we've had leaks in the past, and we've done a lot of searches. By the way, I mentioned Westford. We did Westborough too, which is near you. So that's important to us, and I know it's important to you, and we just want to stress it to the committee. So I mentioned the process, and where we're at is we're probably ready to send out some essay questions. And I know when we talked with Mitch and the board, there was going to be some participation by the committee in crafting essay questions, and we're fine with that. So what we would suggest is that Buzz and I are gonna go back, we've got a series of questions we typically ask in communities. We'll send you some questions. We try to tailor them to specific needs in Northborough, or issues, I should say, in Northborough. And frankly, because we want people to do some homework. If we ask a question, we don't want it to be a rote response. We want them to do some investigation into the community as to what what we're really looking for in the question. And when we get those responses, Buzz and I evaluate them for a lot of things, including content. Have they answered the question? I'm sure in your careers you've seen people who don't really answer the question you ask. So we want to see if the folks that are serious about Northborough have A, done their homework, B, can communicate in a written correspondence, and C, understand the issues that are prevalent here in Northborough. And it's not going to be all encompassing because there's too many things going on, but we want to single out some specific questions. Buzz, talk a little bit?
Yeah, on the questions themselves, we're not gonna ask them to solve a problem in town here. What we wanna know is what's your experience with, let's say, affordable housing, economic development. Have you ever done anything with downtown complete streets programs? That sort of thing. We want them to give us concrete examples of what they have accomplished in their career, either the community they're in now or the one that they were in previously or before that, whatever the situation is. But we want specific examples so that you folks will get an idea of what they have done in the past. So, we're not giving them a design problem for White Cliffs. But we're going to say, what have you done with affordable housing? What have you done with economic development? What have you done with traffic issues? So that we know that they have a background, so that when they step into the job, they have sufficient experience and skills to be able to handle a community as complex as this.
The other thing on the essays, once we get a response, you'll see all this, by the way. You'll see the essay questions because you're going to help develop them. You'll see the responses. You'll see the resumes. You'll see what they send us. And you'll get all that when we're ready to come before you. And I'll explain that process with you folks in a minute. But once we get the essay responses, and oh, by the way, there will be some who will not participate. We see that every time, which tells us the thing we wanted to know. A, they're not interested because they don't want to do the work. They might have 5 resumes out, and if we're the only town asking them to do that, they say, yeah, well, I'm not that interested in doing extra work. Maybe this town will hire me just because I'm a good person. So we will lose a couple, at least a couple, maybe.
Typically 2 out of the group seems like either they don't want to do the work, or they're in a number of searches, and something else is hotter. They got a job offer from somebody else, so they drop out. You see that pretty routinely.
So let's assume for a minute that we have 10, 12 people we're going to send essays out for, and a couple of them don't respond. Buzz and I get those responses. We then set up, we score them, we look at them, we read them, we figure out if they know what they're talking about, and then we schedule phone interviews with each one of them. And that's Buzz and I on a conference call with them, because we want to explore what they sent us. You've all seen resumes and stuff. Sometimes there are gaps. We want to know why there are gaps. We want to know details in terms of separations, when somebody may have left. And we've been in the field, and we know there's a lot of reasons why town administrators and town managers leave. Not always the town administrator or town manager's fault. Probably similar to superintendents, that you see that. So we want to delve into that so that when we come before you with the potential candidates for you to interview, we want to be able to answer your questions. I see from 2016 to 2018, this person wasn't working. Well, yeah, they were, but they didn't mention it, but here's what they were doing. Oh, they're taking us back, whatever, family problems or issues. But we want to have those answers so you don't have to go digging for them. And if we're not satisfied with the answers, we'll either follow up with them or we won't move them forward. Because if somebody's hiding something from us,
Buzz, tell them your story.
You know, well, so I'm talking to this guy from was he in North Carolina? Where that from? Anyway, so I'm talking to this candidate from out of state, and we always ask at the end of the interviews, it's two things. One, you know, are you aware of the salary range? The last thing we want to do is bring a candidate to you folks, and then things break down because, you know, well, geez, I thought with my experience, they'd give me 25% more. Well, that's not the way it works. And then the other thing we ask them is that, well, if we were to Google you, is there anything that you should tell us now? Because oftentimes when you Google somebody, you find out that they had they were terminated, and we get their side of the story. And again, in this business, you know, select boards change, board of selectmen's change, town councils change, city councils change, and they want a different person in the big seat kind of thing. So that, you know, that happens. We know that. But we want, before we read about it, we want to get the story from them. So the guy says, no, everything's good. No, he's from Wisconsin. That's what it was, from Wisconsin. So I said, fine, that's great. Well, you know, we have office backup, and the folks in the office are really good at looking at LinkedIn, at looking at Facebook, at looking at any kind of online presence. They're very good detectives. And I got a call from the office, and Liz says, did you know that he was arrested in North Carolina for disorderly conduct at a bar just 3 months ago? It's like, well, he never said anything to me about it. So I call him back and I said, hey, what happened? Oh, well, you know, it was a little misunderstanding, and, you know, I got his side of the story, and it was so fanciful. I told Bob, and we said, fine, thank you. Appreciate your candidacy, but we're going to move on with the other candidates that we have. So, you know, we are looking for folks to be honest with us. We've done other searches where the, you know, the candidate, we ask them that, they'll say, yeah, you know, when I was in my 20s, you know, I had a little drinking problem, and I was arrested, and you'll see, you know, that I was arrested, but, you know, I'm clean, sober, haven't had a drink in X many years. We say thank you. That's all we need to know, you know, that because some of these there's some sort of Google searches that go way back, and there's just stuff that happens to people. So we want their side of the story first before, you know, we're shocked. As much as the select board doesn't like surprises from their folks, we don't like surprises from the folks who apply to us.
Yeah.
And you know, people have stories.
Yep.
As Bob said, a gap in the resume that looks a little, or you're not working now. How come, you know, you're not working now? Well, you know, there may be reasons for that sort of thing.
Yep.
Doesn't mean they're unqualified for the position.
Yep, just one more anecdotal story on that. We had a candidate, and this is how deep some of our staff members go into it. We had a candidate who Buzz and I both thought was a serious candidate in a community, and we found a comment, we didn't find it, our staff did, on Facebook that the individual made in 2010. And it was an inappropriate comment. And we said, why didn't you tell us that? And he says, I don't even remember saying it. I said, yeah, but it's in there. It's on Facebook. And he's very apologetic and all that, but we didn't move him forward. And again, I don't think it was malicious. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't not say it because he didn't want to tell us. He just forgot he did it. But we'll find him. And you got to just tell us that. You know, and tell us what you can tell us about the incident and how it happened and all that. And he was very forthright with us. And he apologized. But we didn't move him forward because if we found it, somebody would find it. Somebody on a screening committee or somebody in the community would find it and say, why didn't you know about that? So anyway, so once we complete those phone discussions, we may or may not eliminate somebody based on what we're hearing. We then compile the remaining, let's say we get 8 candidates that we think you should see. We'll bring you the packages, the essay questions, the resumes, the cover letter, whatever they've sent us, and we'll send them to you, again, in confidence. These people aren't public yet, so it has to be in confidence. We generally will work through the chair of the committee to distribute documents like that, and however you want to do that, we typically advise you stay off the town's email system, because as you know, that's public. So
I don't know how you're gonna work that out with your members, that's up to you guys and Bob and people who know how to do this kind of stuff. So we will come to a meeting with you in public, I'm sorry, not in public, in person, with you, and we'll go through those candidates. We tell you everything we know about them. You can ask us questions about what you've received, what you're reading, what happened here, those type of things. And that's up to you to decide how many of those, let's say 8, how many of those you want to interview. We don't suggest you interview 8, but it's up to you. And following the interviews, and Mitch will talk about it a little bit, the scheduling on how we do that, you folks will make a decision as to who to recommend to the select board for final interviews. We recommend a minimum of 3. Some communities have sent 4, because typically, especially in a town like Northborough, you've got competition, and some of your candidates may be in other towns. We don't know that, but if you submitted 3 to the select board, and one of those persons dropped out because they got offered a job, then you don't want to send 2 people to the select board, and I don't think Mitch wants that, or the board members want that. So 3 or 4, and you'd make that determination. We don't recommend you rank them, 1, 2, 3, 4. We do not recommend that. We don't rank anybody we give to you. Our role is to find you quality candidates. It's up to you and the select board ultimately to decide the right fit for Northborough. The people we send you will be able to do the job, but not everybody's a good fit. That's not our decision. You guys got to figure all that out.
You mentioned earlier confidentiality, and you brought it up at the meeting where you'll be putting all the names out.
Yep.
Do you mind if I describe what executive session is and how that
Please,
works here?
please
Some
do.
members of this group have been through executive session in one form or another, some have not. The state's open meeting law requires that, in general, all meetings be held in public. So in public, we have an audience tonight. That's good. We are videotaping tonight. That's good. So people at home can see, the work that we do, and that's some of our responsibilities. The open meeting law provides about a dozen exemptions to when you can't have a meeting in public, or when you, in some cases, can opt to have a meeting in private. Private meetings are referred to as executive session. It just means that all of the things about audience, videotaping, everything else goes away. So some of our work must be done in public. So this meeting, we're not talking about names, must be done in public. When we go through questions, figuring out what questions we might want to ask people, that has to be in public. We may opt to either not record those meetings so that people who are potential candidates might not be able to see, or we could say record but hold off and don't air it until afterwards. We'll figure out those details as we get there. But the open meeting law says that for screening committees, when you're actually screening candidates, you hold that in executive session, and that's, as Bob indicated, their current employers might not know that they're looking for another job. And so the open meeting law has been crafted to give them some privacy. And that privacy is, in general, permanent. So at the end of this process, let's say we interview 8 people and we forward 3 to the select board for consideration. Those 3, as soon as the select board starts talking about it, those are public. Those other 5 that were not forwarded, they are secret forever. And that means you can't tell anybody that you interviewed those people. Even 10 years later, you're not supposed to do that, because that's the law. So that's how this process works. Executive session is not used very often, but this is one of the cases where it is absolutely mandatory to do so. I think there's technically an option to not use executive session.
Yeah.
If we advertise that, they'll all pull out, and we won't get any good candidates.
You got that right.
And Mitch, if your decision is 3 candidates going forward from this committee to the select board, what we'd recommend is that we do not notify the other candidates that they are not in the search, because if one of the 3 drops out, you're down to 2, we would have some discussion about who would fill that vacancy, with you folks. So, you're gonna, even though you're not gonna rank the people, we are gonna ask you for like a 4th. If 1 drops out, do we fill this again? We don't want 2. We want 3. if that's what you want to do. So, anyway, it's an exciting process. One of the things that we do at the very end, just so you know, this may be your question, what kind of background check do we do? Well, because Bob and I have worked in this state for so long, we know a lot of the candidates, and if we don't know them, we know people who know them. And that's very helpful for us, because when we come to you in the executive session to go through the 10 candidates, let's say, we will have checked out the candidates. We'll have some Google searches done ourselves. You probably have done your own Google searches, and that's fine. But if we have any questions, we'll talk to people who know them or that sort of thing. But at the very end, we ask we give the select board a motion. It's a conditional offer of employment, and it's conditioned on two things: a successful negotiation of a contract. That's why we ask about salary right up front, because if they think they're going to make X and it is something less than X on the job ad, then they got a little problem. But the other thing is a really thorough background check. That we part of what MRI does is we do quite a bit of work with public safety agencies, and we have folks on staff that do the really deep dive on backgrounds. So they'll obviously interview the people who know the candidate, but they'll go even deeper to former employers or police chiefs, fire chiefs in the former communities. They may not even list them as references, but they will call folks in those towns who were there when Bill Jones was the town administrator or something, and then they'll interview neighbors. Anyway, it's a very thorough search with financial information. So the whole document's, depending on the candidate, could be 25, 30 pages, and it is a confidential document. A copy will go to the candidate who the offer is made to, and then the copy will go to the Board of Selectmen or the Select Board for their review. So if they have any questions, and then after that goes into a personnel file, never to be seen again.
And that's, as Buzz suggested, it's pretty extensive. We need the candidate to sign off and release a lot of information so we can get into financial. We've had candidates with credit problems in the past. I don't know, maybe the board may want to know that they couldn't pay bills, and some of it's very innocent. Look, we've all missed a credit card payment and that type of thing, but we find it. And we see if they've defaulted on loans or, had a mortgage problem or any of that, and that all shows up. That's why the candidate has to sign off on that personal information that allows us to get into the details, so to speak. And it's about a 2-week process. It's not done overnight. It's quite extensive. The town, Northborough, has paid for that already. It's in our contract. So we'll be doing that type of comprehensive background.
And then the town will do its own Corey and Story check. We don't do that. But I imagine the town administrator's office, or sometimes the town administrator, the town clerk, somebody's trained and authorized to do the Corys and Stories. So that you folks do on your own, and you get whatever you can find out of that process about the individual. So the point is, we don't do this deep investigation on every single candidate. Some of our clients think, well, geez, you should do it on every single one. But if we find out information that's compromised about a candidate and then go forward, and you folks know about it, that puts us, our company, and you folks in a compromised situation.
Yeah.
So just so you know. And I don't know, what else?
Well, I think, anyway, that's the process we're going to follow. We envision by the end of, I think you and I talked about it, we'll have to talk with Mitch and the committee, the end of June, we should be able to have some interviews not with you, we'll do that prior to that, for the select board. Assuming we can move the process. And when we talk about moving the process, it's about how much actual involvement, and we're already pretty far into the process that the committee is going to have, and we always assume the committee's going to take it from the essays, and move forward. And that's not going to require a lot of interaction. And we ask that any decisions that need to be made probably go through the chair, rather than Mitch and convening another meeting on a Tuesday night just to say, yes, this is good. Because if that happens, it's going to elongate the process, if you know what I mean. And so that's really up to you. That's a logistical, administrative issue for you. But I think where we are now is we have 12 candidates? 12 candidates that we think warrant the essays. So what we want to do now is think about a schedule for you to get the essay questions, to prepare essay questions. And then I'm not exactly sure, Mitch, as to how you want to run this. Ideally, what we've done in the past is we send out those questions, you send it to everybody, say, here's what MRI is recommending, tweet it, fix it, do whatever you want, edit it. If you have a separate idea on a question, we only want to ask 3, because keep in mind, and we told the select board that, some of these people are pretty engaged in their communities right now, either at town meetings or any of that. So we give them generally 2 weekends to complete the essay responses. Generally work on weekends, because during the week they're pretty busy, a lot of these folks. So we're going to need, in terms of the essay questions, something back relatively quick, Mitch. So I think Buzz and I will talk, and we can send you a series of questions. We have to draft some up. We have the basics that we want to ask, but draft them up to tailor them towards Northborough, and then send them to you. You can distribute them to your committee, and we would suggest any edits or changes, send them to Mitch.
Whatever
Yeah.
you do,
Yeah.
don't reply all.
Right.
Yeah.
Then you
yeah,
get into a
yeah.
round-robin
Yeah.
discussion, it's
Yeah.
a violation of the open meeting law. So
Yeah.
it all has to go back to one person, if it's mentioned, so that you don't get into comments about, gee, I like what you said on this question 3, and I would really think you should tweak it to this. Just give everything to the chair, and that way you don't have a problem with the open meeting law and the communication that can follow up the process.
Yep. Yep. So I think if we start to look at calendars. Yep.
Yeah, I did. It could wait. I don't know. Do you want us, as we go forward, to put everything through you, Mitch, or individually ask, how do you want to handle this? Are we going to strictly go by Robert's rules, or how do you want to run it?
If you have a question during a meeting, just raise your
Okay.
hand or yell out or
All right,
something
just
like
a
that,
quick
yeah.
question, and I know it's elementary. Do you folks verify college transcripts as
Yes.
well?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Because you guys know there's a lot of crackerjack colleges out there.
We know, yeah.
You send $10,000 and you got your master's degree.
So somebody tells us they went to XYZ Community College. You'll see it on the, Mitch will see it, the board will see it, verified or not. And if it's not, well, that says a lot.
Yeah, just on that point though, we haven't seen that sort of resume inflation. That some people may elaborate about their job, but in terms of out and out lying about a college, university, I haven't seen that. I think because they know, today there's enough history and that sort of thing. I don't think they risk it.
I agree.
Yeah.
I've seen it rear its ugly head months and years later,
Yeah.
multiple times. There was a police chief in another town, I won't go into it, but
Yep.
it was 2 years before they found out that he had a high school education, and that's all it was.
Yep.
And he
Yep.
figured because he was coming from the western part of the country, nobody would ever borrow a checker.
Yeah. But we check.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
Just a question. So, thinking about this, and I know that towns have different levels of resources, right, financially to pay people. Do you have a sense of how wide the variance is between what a town administrator in one town gets paid versus another? And with that as a backdrop, where would Northborough stand? Are we middle of the pack, upper quartile?
We had this discussion with the select board.
Yeah.
And we gave them data and about towns, similar towns.
I'm drawing a blank on the precise range that we
Yeah.
ended up with.
Yeah, we did a salary survey
Yep,
of your of adjacent communities, and
185 to 210.
yeah,
Yeah.
185 to 210.
Okay.
Yeah,
and that's reasonable. That's reasonable. Okay? To your competitors, communities around you, that's
Okay.
in that ballpark, which is,
Okay.
and to their credit, they listened to us and said, move it up a bit.
Yeah, I have, just in observing the way towns do things, I've seen towns on occasion try to save a little bit of money and set the bar too low, and that's money foolishly wasted, because
Okay.
you don't get a good pool of candidates. Either quality candidates don't apply,
Mhm.
or you get candidates that have troubled backgrounds that repeat their troubles with you. You know, town of Northborough is a greater than $70 million operation. It's worth it, you know, $210,000 is a lot of money to pay anybody in salary.
Sure.
But it is worth it to get somebody
Yeah.
quality.
yeah, and that really, it helps the pool. You know, lets candidates know that this community is serious about the position. And let me just go, if I may just go off on a little bit of a tangent here. If you folks haven't seen the town charter, I would commend you to go on the town's website and take a look at it. The drafters of the charter 20, 30 years ago did a marvelous job, in our opinion. They set up the a framework for government here that makes these clearly, no question, sets the select board up as the policymakers of the town, which in some communities is a little vague. And then it gives, there's probably a page and a half, if not 2 pages, on the duties and responsibilities of the town administrator. We work in some towns that you think are very good towns, and they appear to be very good. However, all they have, they don't have a charter. They have a job description for the town administrator, which can be changed on any random Monday night meeting. Whereas your charter is baked in, approved by the voters, approved by the legislature. It has, you folks have status. And again, when you have a half hour, take a look at it. It's the envy of communities your size, because of the folks, your predecessors, whoever they were, who hammered this thing out, probably in this room over night after night after night. They put together a great document that I think is one reason why we have such a good pool of candidates, because it doesn't leave up to the imagination on what his or her responsibilities are in this position. So you're very fortunate that way. And of course, you're fortunate in a lot of other ways, but that, in terms of a bedrock of the community, it set this search up and on a good footing.
And it also helps, because we know this, because we both work under charters and special acts of the legislature. I know your candidates are looking at that, because they don't want to walk into a place where there's no rules, if you know what I mean. It's not the Wild Wild West. But both the elected folks and the appointed folks know what their roles should be, because it's all spelled out in your charter. So anybody who's a professional looking to move into a town like Northborough will look at that charter and say, okay, they've got the rules laid out, so I know what my job is, I know what my responsibilities are, and I know what the role of the board is, because the charter says it. And you know, I'm saying that's a perfect world. You know there's always bumps in the road in that relationship and stuff, but that's fine. As long as you have that baseline for the professionals looking to come here, they understand it, and they can work those other issues.
And now that you got me on my soapbox, the other thing, here to your credit, planning board, the master plan. You know, you may think that the master plan is a document that just sits on the shelf and that nobody reads it. the candidates will look at, because they'll look for a couple of things. Good candidates are gonna look at the town charter, there is one. They're gonna look at the master plan, see if it's up to date. They're going to look at the annual report, to see if that's, you'd be surprised how many communities, don't put a lot of attention into their creativity, you folks do, into the annual report. They're gonna look at the open space and recreation plan. Anybody on the Conservation Commission? Again, it's a lot of work as well as developing the master plan, but putting together the open space and recreation plan, a lot of work. The candidates are gonna look at that, because both of those documents, the master plan and the open space and recreation plan, really are I call it a blueprint of the community. What does the community want to establish? What are your goals? What are your objectives? What does the community want to be like? And have they thought about it in 5 years or 10 years? So it really gives the candidates a lot of good information. And you'd be surprised how many communities do not have those two documents up to date. And I'm shocked when I go into a community and see the thing is 10 years old. I'm thinking, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Because it's hard to sell a community when those kinds of sort of foundation blocks aren't there. So you folks have done a lot of good work over the years.
If I could go back to another thing that was discussed earlier, my head has shifted this way. So when you were suggesting that things go through me, I couldn't see everyone's faces to see if any one of their heads were exploding or anything like that. I'm willing to have things go through me. My suggestion is that I also include Mariam as vice chair, so that there's a second set of eyes, rather than me solely making decisions. I think that's more fair to all, because we're a 7-member board. Having the two of us plus whichever individual member contributed an idea is okay.
We think that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, we think that's
Everyone
fine.
good with that?
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
So the next task for us, as we sit here, is to get you some questions, some essay questions that you can distribute to the group.
Yep.
The question is, Mitch, when do we want those returned to us so we can send those out to candidates? Because once we send them out, let's pick a day. If we were to send them out on the 19th, this Friday, which I don't think we will do because we haven't got a lot of time to go through this, we would give the candidates that weekend, the 2021, the following weekend, the 27, 28, 20, which is Memorial Day weekend, which would be a return by the 30th to us, a return of the essay questions, responses to us. As I said, we need about a week to review those. We need probably a week to, maybe not a week, but 2 or 3 days at least to talk to on the phone. So you're into the first weeks of June, first and second week of June, where one of those nights, hopefully during the first week of June, we'll come out and meet you with 8 candidates that we think you should interview.
Given that Memorial Day weekend is coming up so quickly, is that an expedited timeline, or are you thinking that if we get that to the candidates, to give them 2 weekends and one of them being Memorial Day weekend?
It's expedited because we want it to be. We don't want to push into. We want to be very careful. I think we mentioned this, Mitch, and of course Bob's sitting here. We want to be very careful about getting into the July vacation schedules for whomever, you folks, the candidates, that type of thing. So we want to push the process.
How close are you to having the questions, your questions ready?
Buzz and I can prepare those pretty quickly.
Anyone correct me if I'm wrong, just tell us. Just I would say give us a couple of days to turn things around, to meet myself and Mariam, and then the two of us a couple of days to finalize and back to you.
Okay.
And everyone comfortable with that?
Well, yeah, except for then we're looking at not having them go out until Memorial Day weekend.
No, we would go the weekend before that. In other words, I used the 19th. Ideal world, we had everything prepared, we'll send them out the 19th. That ain't gonna happen.
So it is Memorial Day weekend.
So it is the first weekend that they get them will be Memorial Day weekend.
Yes.
Yeah, because I don't think we're going to turn around thoughts and ideas by Friday to have.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Yeah,
So,
probably Monday,
Yeah.
Tuesday,
Yeah.
something like that.
So we're probably looking at, look, we don't have to send them out the 24th, but maybe we can talk about the 26th, maybe talk about sending them the Wednesday, give them a long weekend,
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, if they've got a weekend
Yeah.
to think about it, it's a longer weekend and then a weekend to reply, and then they're pulling them back into us by the 5th or 6th.
Yep,
yeah, we
That feels a
typically,
little more reasonable.
your point's well taken.
Agreed.
Particularly about the 6th. Typically, we like to have them come in 8 AM on a Monday morning, but
Mhm.
because of the weekend, maybe we give them until Tuesday morning or something like that.
well, Tuesday would be, I think what you're talking about is the 6th.
Yeah.
And then return things by the 6th,
Yeah, because Monday will be a legal holiday.
yeah.
So, but we're just talking about 3 questions?
Yeah,
You don't think we can do that by Friday? 3 questions?
I don't know,
Well, they need to send it to me, I'll quickly send it out to everybody. And to be honest, you could send it to Bob and we could send it to everybody, whatever. I mean, to get it out to you fast, I'd ask for 48 hours to get them back to myself and Miriam with any suggested edits. If it turns out no one has any edits, boom, we're done. If it turns out that you and I need to talk on the phone a little bit through that, we can get through that very quickly, at most a couple of days, probably less than that. And then-
yeah, Mitch, I'm worried about what, I'm sorry, what you said about the timing.
Bryce,
Bryce, I don't know if we want to hurry it this week and just get it done by Friday. We may miss something in the interpretation of the, those type of things. I mean, if we delay it basically a week, like you suggested, and we're into the first week in June, I'm not sure that's a big problem, because we can turn around what we get pretty quick. And maybe that second week in June, you schedule your interviews. We need a meeting with you
Yeah.
to determine how, but you can call a meeting within 48 hours, depending on the availability of your
If we
committee.
get Mitch questions this week,
Mhm.
and he gets back to us like, the 24th, let's
Yep.
say, and if the office is ramped up, get them out, the morning of the 25th,
Yep,
and then give them an extra day, like, June, do June 6th, something like that.
if we do that, the schedule that Bryce, you talked about, and get them back by the 5th of June, we schedule something that week with you, Mitch. Maybe the 8th or something, a Thursday or something, and just say, here are the candidates, here's the responses. The problem is, we'd have to, you want to see it ahead of time. You want to see who the candidates are, what they presented, all that. So that may be a stretch. So maybe we schedule something that following week with you, and we can also, you'll make a determination. We can schedule some interviews later in that week, the third week in June. And I'm assuming you'll get it over with, depending on how many you're going to interview. Probably 2 nights, maybe a Saturday. Some screening committees use the Saturday if they have 3 or 4 candidates they want to talk to. And then get it in the last week of June to the select board and say, schedule something. You got 3 interviews.
What is possible, if they come in, if the resume, if the essays come in to June 6th, let's say, we meet with you the week of June 12th, decide if we want to interview 2 nights, let's say, 2 nights the week of June 19th, and then the final interviews with the select board the week of June 26th.
Yeah, that's what I was
Before
thinking.
the 4th of July
Just-
weekend and activities and all that.
Just throwing out that third week in June, I would only be available Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday night.
Okay.
Monday nights are good.
Yep.
Yeah,
Monday's a holiday now?
It's a June.
Yeah, Juneteenth.
June.
So David, you would be available the 20th and 21st?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to assume, Mitch, that you're going to want to talk to, 5 candidates, 6 candidates maybe, so you're going to probably have to do a couple of nights.
Yeah.
We typically ask you to do an hour with each candidate, because you'll learn a lot in an hour. Anybody who's been through these interviews, sometimes if you go beyond that, it gets pretty boring, because everybody's... So you're probably going to need a couple of nights, Mitch.
And what might be helpful is if we start earlier in the day, like o'clock, if people can work their work lives around like a 5 o'clock start. So, because if we're gonna, let's say we interview 6 people,
3 and 3?
3 and 3.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's two, I apologize already, it's 2 long nights, but if we can start in the afternoon, late afternoon, that makes it a little bit easier on you folks.
How are people availability for Tuesday and Wednesday, the 20th, 5 PM plus?
Planning board meetings are the first and third Tuesdays of every month. There is a possibility we don't meet that second Tuesday of the month.
You usually meet at 7 PM?
No, 6 or 7, but I could work that out a little bit if we needed, if we start at 5.
Going back to the questions that the consultants will prepare.
I'm sorry, Dave.
Oh,
I just want to
sorry.
make, is everyone
20th and
okay?
21st looks fine.
Okay,
Works for me.
okay, Tim?
All right,
Works
that
for me.
works,
Good.
works for you, Tim?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I think those will be our 2 interview meetings. We'll play with the time a little bit here and there to accommodate everyone's schedule.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, we got time to work that out.
Yeah.
You guys have to figure that out.
Okay.
It gives you an idea of sort of what lies ahead, so you can work your lives around it.
Mitch, I would also suggest we do something the week of the 12th to determine who you want to talk to.
Yep, agreed.
And I don't know what date's good for you guys, or,
Got a select board meeting on the 12th, that Monday.
Wednesday the 14th, Tuesday the 13th?
Either
I'm
one of those
traveling
days.
for some of those days.
Okay. 15th? Carrie, are you around on the 15th?
Yep.
That's a Thursday. I don't know how you guys schedule things.
We've got combined school committee on the 15th.
I could do the 14th if it weren't 5, if it were later than 5.
And the school committee also probably would be done by 7. It's a 5:30 start. I don't know what we've got on the agenda yet,
This
but
meeting is just to determine who. That's probably not more than an hour and a half, 2 hours the most probably.
Yeah,
I guess.
2 hours max.
Yeah, 2 hours max.
Okay.
Yeah.
14th, do we want to start it at 5?
Oh, it'd have to be, if we start at 7 on the 14th, that would probably be something I could do. Or,
Or if we start, you would rather start at 7?
correct, yes.
Okay,
yes.
that's fine with me. Wednesday the 14th, 7 PM.
Can that work?
Available? Okay.
7 PM, 14th. Candidates.
Virtual or in person?
In person.
So
Is anyone from out of state?
you do have some, and we'll talk to you about that. Those would obviously be, you know.
We could
Zoom.
interview someone
Yeah.
remotely. For executive sessions like this, I think it's better to have in person. Certainly for interviews, I think it is better to have in person
Agreed.
unless the candidate can't make it for one
Yep.
reason or another.
Yep, yep. So Mitch, recap, 20th, 21st is interviews.
Yep.
14th is to determine who you're going to interview.
Yep.
Okay?
So I have Wednesday the 14th at 7 PM, 20th and 21st, 5 PM, plus or minus with some variability.
and Joe, what do you think? 3 hours each night?
Probably be 3 hours each night, assuming.
Figure that for, yeah.
Yeah, assuming we interview 6. 3 hours each.
Yeah, and typically what happens, the second session, let's say the 21st, if you're interviewing 3 candidates, what we'd ask you to do is to set aside some time after and make a determination as to who you want to move forward.
That may be a little longer night
Yeah, yeah.
to deliberate and come up with the 3 for the select board.
Everyone's good with that schedule?
Yeah, I would just note on the 20th, if it's a 3-hour meeting and I start planning board at 7, I would just not be there for that last hour.
Ideally, I'd really like everybody here for all of them. Are folks available to start a little bit earlier, 4 o'clock?
Or what I could do at the next planning board meeting is just figure out if we even need to have, if there are no, I'll know, I'll email the planner tomorrow and see if it's even possible to have public hearings on that day. The deadline may have already passed for that, so.
Okay. Or
If it needs to get moved earlier, that's fine. Go with it anyways.
okay, all right, so Carrie, if you could let me know,
Mhm.
and then I'll circle back with everybody if to modify anything. But for now, assume Wednesday the 14th at 7, 20th and 21st at 5.
Excellent. Excellent. So, Mr. Candidate, somebody asked a question. Scott, I think you asked a question. Yeah.
All right, good. I was going to go back to the questions.
Yeah, okay.
I guess, you folks do this. This is, for lack of a better word, this is your full-time job in your business. It sounds like you guys know an awful lot about how the town works, what the position involves, and what a good skill set, minimum skill set would
Yep.
be for someone to be successful here.
Yeah.
Having said that, I'm just trying to move things along quicker. Unless somebody feels very strongly about a specific subject, that they would want to see a question expanded to include, and as they both said, you don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of, what size the sewer pipe should be. The bottom line is, if anybody has anything they feel very strongly about, that could be brought up tonight to be incorporated ahead of time. If somebody's really hung up on something, I don't know. Other than that, I kind of see the questions going through as kind of a pass-through, just my opinion.
Let us give you a sort of overview and synopsis of the type of questions we ask. We generally will ask a question in any community about their onboarding plan. What are your plans coming into a community that's had a 14, 15-year town administrator? It's going to be different. Who has established a culture here, Bob? It's going to be different. What are your plans to make this transition work? So tell us about that, and if you've ever done it before in onboarding in a community that you happen to be in right now. And that's important information for you folks to see. If they don't know what they're doing, they won't have an onboarding plan. And that comes across pretty quickly. So that's typically something we'll ask. Well, typically, I don't know, Buzz and I will have to think about it because this is a well-managed place. We typically ask about a financial question, but you guys are in pretty good shape financially. You've got good people in place. You've got all of the things we normally ask about that I'm not sure it's terribly important. It's important for anybody who's a chief administrative officer to understand finances. But sometimes we highlight it because a particular community may have had a problem with finances. So we want to see what that person, we're not sure about that for this community. We think you're okay. We will typically ask questions about like hot buttons in a community in that third question or fourth, whatever it happens to be. Things like some of the economic development challenges in this town. The White Cliff, obviously, but Mitch and I have talked about that one. But there were other challenges in this town in terms of.
You mentioned downtown.
Downtown, very important. Terry and I talked a little bit about the stuff that's going on. So maybe we'll ask something around that, to your question, about economic development. What do you know? You got to understand the community. They may not want, for instance, warehousing, things like that we've picked up. So
You may have heard that.
I've heard that. Affordable housing is always one of those initiatives that revolve around economic development, community development, those type of issues. Mixed use, you know all about this, Gary, but we kind of like to find out what people think about those type of things. So that's just general for you guys to know. Those are the type of questions we would think about. And make it specific to Northborough, more specific to Northborough.
And, town-school relations.
Town-school relations
what
are
if,
always,
how
yeah.
have you reached out to the school superintendent, the school committee, in this
Right.
case, school committees? You're familiar with regional school districts, what's your experience with that sort of thing? So, there are certain hot buttons that we're gonna get out there to see just what they've done in that area.
So we talked about the 3 essay questions.
Yep.
We'll also be asking questions when we interview
Yep.
candidates.
We've got a series of questions we can send to you.
Great.
And you can take a look at them.
Okay, great, and maybe finalize those
Yep.
on the meeting of the 14th.
Yeah.
We'll just select.
Yeah,
I will-
because to that point, Mitch, I think the school committee had some kind of direct in interview questions that they would have liked for consideration. So I think we
Yep.
if we could present those at that time, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that the board liked a makeup like this for this committee is we all have different expertise and representation of different groups or boards that we serve on, or experiences that we have outside of town government. Ideally, each of us should draw upon those.
Yeah.
Bob and Buzz will present some questions that are examples, and we can divvy those up. The best thing about, for example, David asked me if you want to ask a question about public safety.
Yep.
Or about the master planning process.
Yep.
Or Tim about finances. You're the best detectors of the responses to those questions. Who asked the question doesn't matter that much, but they'll be looking at you when they answer your question. And you can be the best detector of honesty and accuracy and thoroughness.
To that issue, Mitch, with a committee of 7, we would suggest that we'll distribute, it's 3 or 4 pages of standardized questions, but they all pass the test of what you can and cannot ask, all that kind of stuff. We generally will ask, Buzz, in a committee like this, 2 or 3, each prepare 2 or 3 questions to be ready.
And you ask the same questions of all the candidates.
Yep.
So that, so you get a feel for the answers. But typically, I would say have 2 definite questions, and then if there's time for a third round, a question. And oftentimes, on that third round, a question will come up about an essay response. In the essay on schools, you said X, Y, Z. Well, tell us more about how did you handle that issue
Yep.
with the superintendent,
Yep.
or the school budget, or whatever the situation is. So we do like to have a little bit of leeway in there, so you can ask a question about something that they wrote, if you feel like you got to find out more about it.
Yep. Yep.
So these are questions that we would get approved in advance? Or do you want us, you don't want us free-forming?
Again, we would suggest that once we distribute the questions through Mitch, he will ask you, I'm assuming, along with Miriam, get us the 2 questions you would like to ask.
Okay.
So we'll discuss that on the 14th. So
Yeah.
on the 14th, we will see the essay responses.
Yep.
We will decide what 5 or 6 candidates we will interview, and then as part of that, we will also figure out what questions we will ask those candidates.
Yep.
Okay.
So we're going to have 48 hours to review 3 essay questions, correct? That's the process?
Yeah.
And then we go through the interviews on the 20th and the 21st.
Right.
But we don't get any time to review the interviews. Like, I like to take the information and, instead of making a decision immediately that night, it'd be nice to step away, because people tend to have a recency bias, especially when interviewing. They like somebody, they strike a chord with them during the interview. So I don't mean to suggest slowing the process down, but even having the meetings the 20th and 21st, and then having this committee reconvene on even the 22nd, just to give everybody 24 hours, just to digest what you've heard from
I just don't know the
It
availability.
would have to be the next week.
Yeah.
I'm not available the 22nd.
And does it have to be in person? Can people just email, these are the 3 people I like, to Mitch?
It has to be a vote, so it would need to be a meeting, even if it's a remote meeting. One thing we could do is, David, would you be available for a remote meeting on the 22nd if need be?
During the day. I'm going out to Nantucket to a wedding.
Okay.
So, as I previously discussed with the interview committee, the last thing I'm going to tell my wife is I'm bringing a computer and
Appreciate it.
put up with enough.
Yeah, so we could potentially schedule a 3rd meeting for sometime during the day, the next day, based on availability for a remote meeting if we need it, and then on the 21st decide then whether we want to make a decision immediately or not. And that might, it's hard to anticipate, because we haven't met the candidates yet.
Yeah, we won't.
Sometimes it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
You really know the three. Sometimes you really need to think through it.
Yeah.
Maybe we try to, again, schedule something for the next morning.
Well, back to
Yeah, if need be.
your point, if we're going to hear about background, or to some degree, if background kicks into a question and that comes up during the interview process, and I'm just saying, even with discussion on that second night of the candidates, and looking at the essay questions and how they answered the questions, I don't know.
So
That's-
there are two phases of backgrounds.
Yep.
One will be done in advance of the meeting of the 14th.
Right.
That you will come
That's
to us,
right.
knowing
Yeah.
if there's anything glaring
Right.
about any candidate, and you may weed some out as
Yep.
a result.
We might, yep.
Or you may disclose to us
Yep.
something that you found. And then the next phase of, so we'll know that the 14th.
Right.
The next phase of background happens after the select board makes a final decision.
Right.
That's when
Right,
you do
That's
that
the-
thorough to
criminal
raise
background.
is done at that one.
Yes,
Once
that's
this committee
passed
makes
us.
its recommendation
Yeah, once
to
you
the
make an
select
offer.
board,
Done.
our job is complete.
Yep.
That we will have successfully, hopefully, screened candidates.
Yep.
And Tim, can I just ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So because I got the sense that kind of what you're considering is that, like, upon personal individual reflection, taking that extra time, not necessarily a discussion amongst the group to get to the three, but your own ability to just go home for the night, think through the answers that you heard, think through the essay responses, not as a group, but for you.
Yes.
Which I would.
Yeah,
It'll
when
be
I-
interesting
'cause-
when we get to the 21st, but I would feel similarly.
When I look at this position, I look at it in two buckets. There's the tangible and technical skills that the person needs to bring to the position, and then the intangible, non-technical characteristics that a person needs to bring to the position. What is their leadership style? How do they develop culture? How do they maintain culture? How do they hire? How do they negotiate? How do they make decisions? Like, all of that stuff, I think, especially for this position, is much more important than some of the technical skills.
Agreed.
And all the technical skills are going to come through the background check that these gentlemen do when they present us with the package. That's going to be all the tangible technical skills. And you're only going to be able to get a feel for the intangible through the interview process.
Correct.
And even, what concerns me about that even further is that since this is done behind, but you can't make it public, but you can't even do reference checks on people. You can't talk to people, because if you call up the police chief in X town and say, hey, I'm calling from Headhunter XYZ, can you tell me about the town administrator?
Right.
They're gonna know the town administrator is looking for a job.
Yep.
So you can't even get a feel for the intangible during this process because you can't get the intangible. So the only opportunity that this committee has to get at the intangible of this person is a 1-hour discussion with them.
Correct.
And when you're talking about leading a community with a $70 million budget and I don't know how many employees, I mean, that's a big load to take on for just an hour. And I know that we're not making the final decision, that we're just recommended to the board.
Right.
It'd just be nice to be
But
able
even
to.
for the recommended candidates.
Right.
Yeah.
But it'd just be nice to have some time to just let it digest, to let it sit in, so.
I agree with you. I don't think anybody's going to come here that doesn't have a set of skills to be able to do the job. The question is, what kind of a person are they? How do they run HR? Are they good negotiators? Are they just good people? Are they micromanagers, dictatorial type leadership? I mean, those to me are more important things than, nobody's going to come here that can't add 2 and 2.
Right. And when you give a candidate the time to write out an essay, like, a good candidate's gonna take a lot of time to sit down and write that essay. It's almost like a political debate where you ask them a question, and just the facial expression when they make, when they're answering the question tells you more than the words they say. If they pause for just that split second, like, it's just that the body language about it is so important.
Yeah, the other thing, Tim, one of the things that we put quite a bit of work into is when we discussed with the select board, and we talked to a lot of people in town. We talked to all the department managers, we talked to a number of elected officials and appointed officials, and that helped us create the ideal profile of the candidate. And I guess I'll say this, we know that there are some tweaks that we needed to engage with in terms of the ideal candidate for the fit here in Northborough. And if you take a look at this, it's all posted on your website and everything else, and it's what the candidates are reading. They're looking at it and saying, oh, that's me. Oh, a collaborative approach. I'm not a dictatorial type of manager. That's what they're looking, oh, that's me. So we put some time, and the people who applied understand what we're looking for. As we say to candidates, look, take a look at the profile we developed, because that was developed in consultation with the community. If you're a change agent, that's not what they need. Some towns need a change agent. They need a strong town manager to come in and blow up stuff. You don't need that. So we tried to listen to the people we talked to and try to incorporate that into our profile that you're talking about, Tim, because that is the key. The technical skills, as Dave suggested, are going to be there. It's the right fit for this community.
So just hearing what a couple of the committee members feel, I don't disagree necessarily with the need for a little space, but I wonder if it would be helpful to deliberate a little bit so we could hear, keep those things in mind as we think about it.
Yeah, as I said, the group may realize after the interviews that it's an obvious three. The group may say, you know what, I want to think about it some more. In consideration particularly of David's time the next day, could we schedule something for the next morning, probably over Zoom at 9 o'clock in the morning if people are available? What time works for you?
Well, I gotta get on a ferry, I gotta get over to Nantucket, I can't check in at 3 o'clock, so.
Okay.
I think, with all due respect, trying to do anything on the 22nd is not realistic for me.
Okay.
I'd be happy to do Sunday, I'd be happy to do the Sunday after. No, and I realize we want to move this along, but I just see too many pieces in the air to have a failure that day and have it not work.
Okay. Totally respect that. And that's through the following day.
I'm coming, I won't be coming home till late that Sunday.
Okay.
For anybody that wants to break into my house. It's on record. It's on record. I used to love sending letters to the Board of Selectmen. I'll be out of town from 5 o'clock on Friday, so, break into the house that day.
But to your point, Mitch, if we get to the end of the meeting on the 21st, we may need to then schedule time. I don't know that it's.
Because we have to provide 48 hours notice to post.
Well, we could
that's
do
why
that
I was
from-
thinking
well, we
about
could do
the
that
20.
from-
That's
from
what I was thinking
Monday.
about the 22nd, 27th.
Yeah.
Second isn't going to work,
No.
and we're pushing into the following week.
We're looking at Monday at the
We're looking
earliest.
at Monday,
Yeah.
we can schedule Monday on when, essentially Wednesday.
And back to your point, that gives everybody more time to look at responses and, whatever notes they made from the interview.
With the downside that then likely
Pushes
delays
us, yeah,
the
yeah.
select board's interview process by a week. If it does, it does. Everyone's gonna do their work. Yeah.
Or move things up.
I don't think we can get too much.
That's
earlier.
tight.
Yeah,
That's
I think this is a good schedule.
I don't know,
And
give them 1 weekend to get their essays done, put a gun to their head and see how they do under pressure. I've gone home from assessment centers with homework, had to go down to Staples, buy an easel board, markers, create a whole presentation, and have been up to 1 o'clock in the morning to come back the next day at 8 o'clock to present it, so. No, I understand and I agree with what you're saying, just.
In regards to Bob, are we under any time constraints? Because this impacts our time. If Bob's time here is up as of July 1st, and we have to have a replacement in by July 1st, is there an end?
You mean by town code or my schedule?
Yours?
Just by I don't know if you're here under contract, if it's for 90
He's already
days.
out the window, so it doesn't matter.
So you may find you got people that are gonna have to give 90 days notice minimum.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so Ideally, the select board would make a final decision before July 1st. If it doesn't happen until a week later, it doesn't happen until a week later.
Okay, that was my.
But once we give somebody an offer, we have no idea. They could start the next Monday, or they might say, yeah, we can't start for another 3 or 4 months. And, you know, we hope that we can continue to have Bob's services.
No, the reason I asked, I think the code says that for an initial 3 months and then an extension. I thought that's what you were getting at.
Yeah, I just wasn't, I would assume there was something in there around the contractor language in there is for how long you can
See if
serve.
they
I just didn't know what it
wanna
was.
keep it.
You know, those are things we could figure out if we need to
Okay.
figure them out. Yeah.
So there isn't like, this is the last day, we have to have somebody in by this day. Okay.
All right, so 20th and 21st will be our interviews. We will deliberate at the end of the meeting on the 21st. If we are not ready to make a decision, we will then schedule a follow-up meeting. Okay, good.
And Mitch, the 14th is solid.
14th
For everybody.
is solid.
Okay.
Will you be sending this all out in email so that we all have?
Will you be sending this out in an email? So
The schedule,
Dates.
we'll put something together and send it to you. The only other thing, logistically, or from a technical perspective, I've got all the emails here. I've got your email and I've got Kerry's email, but those are the town of Northborough emails.
You'd rather have them not on?
What do you think? Because they're public if
No, I think your suggestion's best, not on the town system.
not on the town system. So, Kerry, I don't know if you have an individual personal email, or Mitch, you want us to use that?
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine, I think my email's public anyway, though, personal or otherwise.
Well, personal, that's one thing, but if it's the towns, it's.
Yeah, I mean, technically, it's public record except if exempted.
Mhm.
And these,
Mhm.
the discussions about names and things
Yeah.
like that would be exempted in any case, and questions about things that are not exempted are public record in any case. I don't think it matters that much difference, but if you've got a comfort level.
Well, I'm only saying that we are going to, in the not-too-distant future, send you the names of people. And if it's on the town of Northborough, and these are confidential,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
and we could talk about it
Yeah.
and figure it out.
But, sorry, so just for clarification, even if sent to Northborough, though, it's still confidential.
It's confidential, but could become public. Confidential documents, after a period of time, when the issue's over, somebody can request it, and
Yeah, even
Yeah.
executive session minutes
Yeah,
are
right,
searchable.
right. Yeah, it's tricky. And Bob and I went through this, Mitch and I went through this. The Attorney General's changing the rules all the time. But,
Yeah, I mean, whatever you suggest.
Well,
I'm
for
happy
the
with.
time being, we're going through Mitch.
yes,
So it's my
right.
problem.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Mitch and Mary, I'm assuming, Mary, we're going to include you in these emails.
I would like that.
You're the vice chair. Yeah, okay. Yeah, we have her email. Okay. Good. I think we got a lot accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been a good meeting. Is there anything else that either of the two of you suggest that we go through tonight?
No, I think
I think.
we're in good shape.
So our takeaways, Mitch, is that we've got to get you the essay questions, proposed essay questions. You're going to distribute those. We've got to get you, it's not immediate, but we've got to get you some questions that you guys can start to think about for the interviews, the interview questions. And by the way, throughout the process, I know we're all kind of trying to figure out dates. We're talking to the candidates. And when we talk to them about the semifinals and stuff, we're going to say, you know what? Take a look at your calendar. You may be a finalist, and the expectation is it's going to be the last week in June. So take a look at your calendars now. So we're talking to them about all this. If there's conflicts, we'll let you know. But so they're going to be aware of the dates that you guys are establishing. So.
Great, I appreciate that. Bob, from that Bob, anything else you think we should discuss as a committee before we wrap up tonight?
No, I think it's been covered. I think the points that I would make have been made.
Members of the committee, any other thoughts before I ask for a motion to adjourn? In which case, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Second. Okay, motion made and seconded. So interesting having an in-person meeting. I have to ask for a roll call. All those in favor of adjourning? Aye. Unanimous. We're adjourning again. Thank you very, very much, everybody.
It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to it.